If you find an empty Chuck E. Cheese, don't enter. Every town has its tales, whispered secrets that live in the shadows of local lore. But the story from my hometown might just eclipse any urban legend you've heard online. Nestled in a quiet corner with just 1,500 souls, its name remains unspoken to deter any thrill-seeking adventurers. It's safer for everyone that way. This peculiar tale centers on an abandoned Chuck E. Cheese's hidden on the desolate northern edge of town. Once a lively hub before I was even born, the town thrived briefly. However, the excitement waned rapidly after the main factory plant, which employed a significant chunk of our population, relocated, taking most local businesses with it. Chuck E. Cheese's, among other franchises, saw a drastic drop in visitors and eventually closed, leaving behind nothing but a shell of its former vibrant self. The eerie silence around the place took a chilling turn about 25 years ago with the disappearance of Johnny Cameron, a 7-year-old boy. Legend has it, Johnny and his older brother Alex concocted a late-night adventure to the then-abandoned venue. They slipped away under the cover of darkness, their departure unnoticed by their sleeping parents. They reached their ghostly playground without incident. What happened next remains a mystery, but the morning revealed a harrowing scene. Alex was discovered alone, trembling in front of the dilapidated building, repeatedly muttering a haunting refrain from the chain's commercials, "Where a kid can be a kid." Those chilling words were all that he would ever speak of the night. Following the incident, he was rumored to have been institutionalized, and whispers suggest he remains confined to this day. The police conducted an exhaustive search, but the only clue uncovered was one of Johnny's shoes, eerily half-submerged in the murky depths of the ball pit. This sole piece of evidence added a sinister note to the already grim folklore surrounding the old Chuck E. Cheese's, sealing its fate as a place of dark memories and whispered warnings. As the years slowly passed, the weight of their son's unresolved disappearance took a devastating toll on the Cameron family. Brady Cameron was overwhelmed by the anguish of losing Johnny and, unable to bear the pain, ended his life with a shot from a 9mm just a few years after the tragic incident. With the family patriarch gone, Susan Cameron, engulfed in grief and without her family's support, spiraled down a destructive path of alcohol and drug dependency. Locals would often spot Susan, haunted and disheveled, in the same parking lot where her eldest son had been found. She appeared lost to the world, murmuring to herself, a shell of the person she once was. Her tragic end came about a decade after Johnny's vanishing, when she was found lifeless in that very parking lot, a victim of a fatal overdose. The toxicology report revealed a lethal mix of substances in her bloodstream, confirming the grim rumors that circulated in hushed tones among the townspeople. This series of tragic events fed into the urban legend that now hangs over our town like a dark cloud. Many believe that an evil presence resides within the decrepit walls of the Chuck E. Cheese's, lurking among the dusty remnants of arcade machines. The legend has been dubbed Cameron's Curse, with tales of dire consequences for anyone who dares enter the abandoned site, and a chain of misfortune for their loved one. Despite the eerie stories, I've always been a skeptic. My interest lay more in debunking myths rather than believing in tales of ghosts or those late-night internet challenges that claim supernatural encounters. This skepticism led me directly into the very situation I find myself recounting now. It happened when I was 12 during a typical summer night walk with my best friends, Jack and Henry. Our small town didn't offer much in terms of entertainment, so walking and talking was our go-to activity. As we meandered through the streets, Jack abruptly cautioned Henry. "Hey, watch it," Jack snapped as Henry, engrossed in his phone, almost walked into a street sign. "Who's got you so hooked on that phone tonight?" I asked, curious about Henry's unusual preoccupation. "Sorry guys, it's that girl Jessica I mentioned before," Henry replied, slipping his phone away, a hint of red coloring his cheek. Henry, his cheeks tinged with excitement, shared with us, "I asked for her number right before summer break started. I think things are really going well." He beamed with a confidence rarely seen in him, given his usual reserved nature. "That's great, man. Jessica is quite the catch," I encouraged, genuinely happy for him. "Have you guys made plans to hang out?" "Not yet, but I'm thinking of inviting her to hang out at Ford Lake next week," Henry replied, his voice filled with hopeful anticipation. However, before he could finish his thought, Jack cut in with a smirk. "No way you're really talking to Jessica." "Come on, man, she's out of your league. Are you sure you weren't just texting your mom?" "Need your blankie too?" Jack teased, his grin widening as he saw he'd struck a nerve. Henry's face flushed deeper, his eyes glossing over with frustration and hurt. "Shut up, Jack. You're just pissed because she wouldn't even glance your way," Henry retorted, his voice cracking under emotional strain. I could get her number easy, Jack scoffed, not noticing my sudden distraction. Cole, come on. Hurry up, he called out as he turned to find me standing still, my gaze fixed across the street. Henry and Jack's argument faded into the background as they followed my stare, their expressions turning pale when they saw what had captured my attention, the ominous silhouette of the abandoned Chuck E. Cheese's. An oppressive feeling of dread hung in the air, and for a moment, none of us could speak. How did we end up here? We haven't been walking that long, Henry muttered, bewildered and anxious. I don't know, but let's head back, I whispered, my voice barely a murmur, my mind still grappling with the unease that clung to the decaying building. As we turned to leave, Jack's sharp cry pierced the night. Cops! True enough, a police cruiser was slowly approaching our position down the road. Panicked, I shouted, "This way, quick!" We all broke into a run, hearts pounding not just from the fear of breaking curfew, but from the unsettling encounter that seemed straight out of the very legends we had grown up fearing. Before I fully realized what was happening, we had inadvertently sought refuge behind the very structure that had just captured our fearful attention. Gasping for air, our backs pressed against the cold wall of the abandoned Chuck E. Cheese's, Henry panted, his hand clutching his chest. Think they're gone? I don't know. I'll check, I managed to say between labored breaths, my heart pounding against my ribcage as if trying to escape. Creeping towards the corner to sneak a peek, the sudden wash of blue light from a police cruiser illuminated the night, sealing our fate. A gravelly voice erupted from a megaphone. "Boys, come out with your hands up. I know you're back there." It was Officer Jenkins, a name that brought no comfort. He was notoriously the toughest of our small town's police force, and none of us wanted to be on his bad side. What do we do now? Henry's voice shook with palpable fear. Jack, with a grimace, motioned towards an employee entrance that seemed barely used. I'm not up for a lecture in grounding for a month. Let's take our chances through there. The door was marked by a faded employees only sign, clinging to its rusted purple frame. I'm with you, I agreed, wary of Jenkins' known penchant for embellishing stories to our parent. But what about the curse? Henry's voice cracked as he mentioned it. Jenkins' voice boomed again, cutting through the night. Don't make me come back there. His threat was all the motivation we needed. We scrambled to the door, which oddly enough was already slightly open, as if inviting us or warning us of the mysteries that lay beyond. We piled in just in time, Jack sliding the bolt into place with a thud. As our breathing slowed and our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we found ourselves in what appeared to be an old break room. Moonlight trickled in through a small window, casting long shadows and giving the dusty room a ghostly glow. It looks like we're in some sort of break room, Henry whispered, his voice barely a squeak in the eerie silence. He was right. The room, untouched by time, held remnants of a life once bustling with laughter and breaks taken in haste, now just a quiet specter of the past. The air in the break room was thick with the musk of neglect. To our right, a pair of foldable tables were almost invisible under a blanket of dust, each flanked by 4 grimy chairs. In the corner, an old tube TV dangled precariously from the wall on a brittle plastic arm, looking as if it might give way at any moment. Next to it, a grimy refrigerator leaked an ominous brown liquid, pooling silently on the grimy floor. Beside the fridge, a rust-stained sink hugged the wall, its presence marked by water damage and neglect. On the left, a row of battered purple lockers stood like silent sentinels, their shadows merging with the dim light to create an even more oppressive darkness. The atmosphere was thick with the sort of silence that presses in on the ears, heavy and unyielding. Before we could fully absorb our grim surroundings, Officer Jenkins' muffled commands from outside hastened our decision to keep moving. Let's find a better hiding spot, I whispered, motioning towards another door across the room. Jack and Henry nodded, their faces pale, eyes wide with the fear of the unknown that lay ahead. Henry's hands shook noticeably as we tiptoed past the refrigerator, the stench of decay briefly overpowering our senses and urging us to hasten our escape from the break room. Gently, I nudged the door open and we peered into the broader expanse beyond. The vastness of the main arcade area unfolded before us, a cavernous space that seemed to stretch endlessly into shadows. Dimly, I could make out the outlines of a ticket booth at the front, its glass case displaying a row of vintage stuffed animals, their vibrant colors faded after years of waiting in vain. Scattered throughout the room were the hulking forms of arcade machines, their screens dark and silent, relics of a joyous past now long forgotten. To our right, 8 metal picnic tables were arranged in a neat row, each one crowned with the remnants of meals never finished. pizza boxes strewn about like the aftermath of a hurried evacuation. Beyond the tables, the children's play area loomed, a once vibrant jungle of colorful plastic tubes now dulled by dust and disuse. At the far end of this melancholic playground, a long purple slide twisted down into the depths of a ball pit, its colors a stark contrast to the somber scene. This eerie, abandoned playground, once filled with laughter, now whispered only of secrets and stories left behind. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the tragic story of Johnny Cameron's lone shoe lost amidst the multicolored balls in the pit. The eerie silence of the place weighed heavily on me, amplifying the unsettling feeling that invisible eyes were scrutinizing our every move. As I turned sharply to the right, my heart skipped a beat. Against the back wall, a stage I hadn't noticed before loomed ominously. Atop it, 3 animatronic figures stood frozen in a tableau that seemed straight out of a horror game. Perhaps Five Nights at Freddy's. Their heads were tilted in an unnatural angle, their gazes fixed intently upon us. The one nearest, fashioned like a chef with a large dark mustache, bore an expression of such hostility it felt as though it was staring right through me. "Let's keep moving," Jack whispered, his voice laced with fear. We navigated the maze of arcade machines, the silence of the room punctuated only by our cautious steps, until we neared the front of the store. Suddenly, Henry gestured for silence, pressing a finger to his lips, his face pale as he motioned urgently towards the employee restroom near the ticket booth. The door creaked ominously open, and my pulse quickened. Peering from behind an arcade cabinet, I saw the door swing wide, revealing the unimaginable. Bathed faintly in moonlight, a grotesque figure emerged, a human-sized rat standing eerily on its hind legs. This monstrous creature, with its frenzied yellow eyes and twitching left eye, exuded a terrifying presence. Its mouth, a dark void framed by uneven orange teeth, seemed to snarl silently at us. Patchy gray fur covered its body, and some areas were completely bare, revealing sickly skin underneath. Most disturbing of all was the tight purple t-shirt it wore, emblazoned with the Chuck E. Cheese logo stretched grotesquely across its chest. The sight of this familiar childhood icon twisted into such a nightmarish form sent a shiver of pure horror through me, turning my blood cold. The realization struck me with chilling clarity. It was him, Chuck E. Cheese himself, transformed into a nightmarish creature of fur and fangs. My shock was broken by a frantic motion at the edge of my vision. Jack was wildly gesturing, trying to catch our attention through the chaos. Henry and I both turned toward him just in time to see him mouth the plan. "Run on the count of 3. "Where to?" My silent question was met by Jack's pointing toward the colorful play area at the far end of the room. I took a brief moment to register our destination, then refocused on Jack. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Chuck E. sniffing the air, his movement suggesting he was on high alert. We were running out of time. Jack silently counted down with his fingers. 1. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins. 2. Each second stretched on, anticipation tightening its grip. Jack's face betrayed a moment of hesitation, fear etched deep in his expression. 3. We burst into action, sprinting with all our might, dodging between the dormant arcade machines that had suddenly roared to life. As we raced toward safety, the sound of Chuck E.'s claws scraping against the carpet echoed menacingly close behind. Then, unexpectedly, the entire arcade lit up as all the machines powered on at once, flooding the room with light and the familiar jingles of games long silent. Overhead, a speaker crackled to life, looping a distorted and eerie version of the old Chuck E. Cheese's jingle, "Where a kid can be a kid." Each repetition twisted the innocent slogan into something sinister, the voice growing more menacing with every loop. Ignoring the sensory overload, I kept my eyes fixed on the play area. The glowing screens and haunting melody created a surreal backdrop as we made our desperate dash for refuge, the monstrous Chuck E. looming ever closer in our frantic escape. Amid the overwhelming chaos, we pushed on toward the dining area, the finish line tantalizingly close. But then a scream shattered the moment, a sound so full of terror it rooted me to the spot. It was Jack. The glimpse I stole as I looked back would haunt me forever. Chuck E. had attacked, pouncing with predatory ferocity as he tore into Jack's abdomen. Jack's face contorted in unimaginable pain, his body writhing as Chuck E. savagely ripped at his flesh. Through clenched teeth, he gasped, "Keep running." His voice was barely a whisper over the grotesque sounds of his flesh being devoured as a dark pool of blood formed rapidly beneath him. Chuck E.'s face was a mask of blood, and Jack's desperate attempts to fight back were futile. I'm sorry, I whispered back, tears streaming down my face as I forced myself to turn away from my friend's suffering. Every instinct screamed to go back, to fight, to save him, but the stark reality was that stopping meant death for all of us. Driven by a surge of desperate energy, Henry and I plunged into the maze of colorful plastic tubes, diving into the nearest cylindrical entrance. Crawling frantically, we navigated through the twisting network of play area tubes, the echoes of Jack's agonizing screams piercing the air behind us. Guilt and grief clawed at my chest with each of his cries, which gradually grew fainter until they ceased altogether. Exhausted and emotionally shattered, we eventually paused. Collapsing into a fit of sobs, I could barely articulate the horror. Jack, blood, dead. I managed between breaths, my face wet with tears and snot. Henry, his face lined with determination, gripped my shoulders and locked eyes with me. Cole, look at me, he urged with a stern yet encouraging tone. We have to make it out alive first. Then we can grieve. We need to be brave. Jack would have wanted that. His words, though heavy, carried a strength that slowly seeped into me. Nodding through my tears, a flicker of resolve ignited within me. Yeah, you're right, I stuttered, wiping my face. We owed it to Jack to survive this nightmare. In the silence that followed, the only sounds were the haunting echoes of the arcade machines and the twisted, demonic distortion of the once cheerful jingle blaring outside, reminding us of the horror just beyond our hideout. The haunting refrain of Chuck E. Cheese is where a kid can be a kid looped relentlessly through the speakers, each repetition sinking me deeper into dread. I tried to shove the fear aside when Henry's serious voice pulled me back to the moment. Cole, I need you to promise me something, he said, his gaze averted. What is it? I asked, puzzled by his tone. If I don't make it out of here... His voice trailed off, his eyes distant. I quickly grasped his arm, forcing him to look at me. Don't talk like that, I said sharply. We will make it out, I asserted, trying to infuse both our spirits with confidence I was far from feeling. I know, but if something happens, just tell my mom I love her, he murmured, a single tear escaping down his cheek. That's not going to, I started, but he cut me off with a firm look. Just promise me, he insisted. I nodded, feeling the weight of the vow. I promise, I conceded reluctantly. The air hung heavy for a moment, then a loud clunk from below shattered the silence. Shit, it knows we're in here, I whispered, panic rising. We have to move or it'll catch us, Henry hissed a whisper, urging me to find the exit. I didn't need further prompting. I surged forward through the tunnels, the sound of Chuck E.'s claws scraping closer, spurring me on. My knees ached and my hands blistered as I pushed against the hard plastic, every turn a gamble. I veered right, dead end. I doubled back, taking a left, another dead end. Forward was the only way left. Relief washed over me as I finally saw an opening ahead, the end of the tunnel bathed in a harsh, inviting light. With the sound of those dreadful claws too close for comfort, I hurled myself down the last slope, diving headfirst into the ball pit. Henry was right behind me. Frantically, I swam through the colorful sea, pushing the balls aside as I clawed my way to the edge. I scrambled out, heart pounding, and spun around just in time to help Henry. Together, we emerged from the pit, gasping for breath, our eyes scanning for any sign of the monstrous rat that haunted our steps. As I turned around, my heart sank. Henry was gone. I was certain he had slid down right behind me. The unsettling rustle from the ball pit spiked my nerves as I tentatively called out, "Henry!" No answer came, only the ominous shifting of the colorful orbs that now seemed to harbor unseen terrors. Rooted to the spot, I watched in horror as the disturbance in the pit intensified, the plastic balls churning as if something monstrous stirred beneath. The eerie silence that followed was abruptly shattered when the ball pit erupted violently, propelling plastic spheres into the air like a grotesque fountain. From the chaos, Chuck E.'s horrifying form surged forth, the lower half of his body still obscured by the pit. His ghastly, discolored teeth snapped in the air and fresh blood dripped from his chin, staining his already ragged Chuck E. Cheese t-shirt a darker shade of red. His frenzied yellow eyes locked onto mine with a piercing gaze that screamed of unbridled hunger, a primal, savage hunger that seemed to recognize me as its next prey. In a swift, fluid motion, Chuck E. submerged again, his movements shark-like as he torpedoed towards me, sending a wave of balls cascading in every direction. Seizing the moment, I sprinted towards the exit, the echo of Chuck E.'s thunderous movements close behind. The sinister glow from the animatronic's eyes seemed to chase me as I ran, their malevolent stares pushing me to the brink of despair. In that desperate sprint, I found myself praying to any deity that might listen, begging for escape. The exit loomed ahead, my gateway to safety. I could feel the damp, foul breath of Chuck E. grazing the back of my neck, propelling me forward with terror. With a final burst of adrenaline, I hurled myself through the exit door, slamming it shut and twisting the lock just as a heavy thud shook its frame. Another violent bang followed, testing the strength of the door. Not daring to wait and see if it would hold, I raced to the employee exit, throwing my body against it with all my remaining strength. Gasping for breath, I stumbled out onto the warm asphalt outside, my knees scraping painfully against the ground. Relief washed over me even through the pain, knowing I had narrowly escaped the jaws of a nightmare. Overwhelmed by a torrent of grief, I broke down completely. The screams and sobs from my friends poured from me until my throat was raw and my voice a mere whisper. In the midst of my anguish, I barely noticed the presence looming over me until I looked up to see Officer Jenkins. His expression was grave and filled with sympathy, a clear reflection of pity in his eyes. He began to speak, his voice heavy. The other two, they didn't, but he couldn't finish. The unspoken words hung in the air, thick with sorrow. I shook my head slowly, tears welling up again, ready to spill over. Officer Jenkins paused, a single tear dropping from his eye before he composed himself and extended his hand to help me up. His grip was firm as he pulled me to my feet. We walked in silence towards his cruiser, his hand resting on my shoulder. He turned to me, his tone serious but gentle. "Cole, I'll explain everything to your parents. If anyone asks, you didn't see anything, okay?" I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. Officer Jenkins kept his promise. He drove me home, spoke with my parents, and left them to comfort me. My mother's embrace was tight, her own tears mingling with mine as I sobbed uncontrollably, mourning a life forever changed, a life now missing the presence of my dear friend. The following weeks were a blur of sorrow. The town's condolences were constant, each one a reminder of what had been lost. No amount of kind words could fill the void left by Henry and Jack. Eventually, the town organized a joint memorial service for them. It was heartfelt and respectful, a true honor to their memories. I fulfilled the promise I made to Henry. At the service, his mother was there, grief etched deeply into her features. After the crowd had thinned, I approached her hesitantly. She enveloped me in a tight embrace, holding on as if clinging to a piece of her son through me. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Mrs. Abbott, Henry loves you." Her response was a soft sob, her eyes momentarily brightening with the bittersweet comfort of my words, a testament to the bond Henry and I had shared, now a cherished memory preserved in the hearts of those who loved him. "Thank you," Mrs. Abbott whispered, her voice breaking as she turned to leave. The echo of that night, the horrors and losses have haunted me incessantly. Jack and Henry's absence is a void that is never filled. The pain of their loss lingers sharp as ever. Since that day, I've kept the true horrors of that night to myself, never sharing the full truth with anyone else. The day I turned 18, I left my hometown behind, vowing never to return. Now, at 27, my life has seen its share of joy and love. I'm married to the woman of my dreams, and we're eagerly anticipating the birth of our first child. However, the shadow of that night has stretched far and wide, touching more than just my immediate circle with misfortune. Tragedy seems to follow me like a curse. My uncle lost his arm in a gruesome accident. My father was killed in a car crash, and a fire left my cousin without a home. I tried to write these off as cruel coincidences, random strokes of fate, but the weight of them has grown too heavy to bear as mere accident. Now, driven by a desperate need to protect the remnants of my happiness, I find myself drawn back to the origin of my nightmares. Just yesterday, my wife received a devastating diagnosis of stage 4 breast cancer, and it shattered the fragile peace I'd built around my past. So why am I dredging up these painful memories after all these years? Why now, when I've tried so hard to forget? Because I'm on a mission. I'm currently on an 8-hour drive back to the place I swore I'd never return to. I'm going to confront and destroy the source of my life's darkness. Armed with 10 gallons of gasoline and a book of matches, I plan to burn down that cursed Chuck E. Cheese, hoping to obliterate the malevolent force that dwells within its walls. I don't know if it will change anything, but I have to try. I hope that by facing this demon, by making it suffer as I have, I can finally cleanse my mind of that haunting mantra, where a kid can be a kid. Maybe then I can find some semblance of peace, or at least a chance to begin anew.